The annual owners meeting down in Arizona tell us anything about the closeness of the Jets and Packers as it pertains to an Aaron Rodgers trade? What's up, Jets fans, and welcome to another edition of Jet Nation Live. We are your hosts, Tereman and Glenn Naughton. Bit of a slow week, but we do have some news coming out this week. Like as I mentioned, owners meeting down in Arizona. All 32 teams, whether it's their owners, GMs, head coaches, I believe all 32 head coaches were there. They get together. They just, there's some dumb rule changes that we might get into if you want to touch on those. But just, everybody thought this would be a deadline or a key timeline point in the Aaron Rodgers trade. So far, it hasn't really come to fruition, although there has been some speculation. Glenn, how are we doing tonight? You feeling any more confident about this trade getting done soon?
Define soon, some people feel like it's going to run up to training camp and other people feel like the draft is a soft deadline. I think it is. I mean, listen, if you're Green Bay, and you don't get it done by draft time, whatever pick you're getting next year is going to be significantly lower. And if it's not, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are going to be looking for jobs. So I don't know, especially, I mean, that's a whole different conversation of where the Jets are with those two. But listen, I still feel like it's going to get done. Everyone feels like it's going to get done. I can't. The compensation is, obviously it's all rumor at this point, but I still have a hard time believing. I feel like if Joe Douglas, and I've said this before, if they give up a 2, I mean, I've said from day one, a 1 isn't happening. But I really thought a 2 wouldn't happen either. Even with the extra one from the Elijah Moore deal, I just feel like it's too much. The thing is, there's no precedent, not that I can think of. Like, I can't remember a Hall of Fame quarterback being traded for what was largely expected to be a 1-year, maybe 2-year rental. Like, even when we talk about the Brett Favre deal, which should be comparable, the Jets didn't give up a 2. And that was, nobody thought Favre was going to retire that year. I mean, I think everyone kind of knew he was trying to work his way to Minnesota anyway. But yeah, I'm trying to think of a GM saying, yeah, here's a top 50, top 45, whatever pick for a 1-year rental. Like, I can't think of that happening. And it just seems so anti-Joe Douglas that I'm having a hard time believing it. I guess maybe he's willing to do it, and they're saying this holdup is that he wants a 3 or something in return, another pick for protection in case Rodgers retires, which that obviously makes it a little easier to accept. But I just can't see him straight up saying, yeah, here's a 2 and a whatever for 1 year of Rodgers. It's that would be just not something I would expect from him because it's not a smart move, and he generally makes smart moves.
Yeah, I think we'll just jump right into it from there. Yesterday, the article came out. Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports put out an article with a reported package that was gaining steam publicly around Aaron Rodgers and what the Jets would have to trade for him. And I'm glad you used that word protections because that's exactly what they wanted, at least for the Jets side of it. This is a quote from the article. The trade is currently orbiting a deal that would swap Aaron Rodgers for 2 high draft picks, and the deal is getting closer despite stiff negotiation over how those picks would stack up and whether the package would include give back protection for the Jets if Rodgers does not play beyond 2023. So basically, the rumored package was the Packers would receive the Jets' 2023 second-round pick and a 2024 second-round pick that could graduate to a first-round pick with achievable team performance escalators. This is all verbatim from the article. And the Jets would then receive Aaron Rodgers and a 2024 conditional pick if Rodgers does not play in 2024. So realistically, I think that that's an okay framework for a deal if that conditional pick from Green Bay is a second-round pick. Because if Rodgers is, like you say, a 1-year rental and you're giving up the 2 and a potential 1 because we're hoping that it's a 1 realistically for as a fan perspective because we want to host an AFC divisional game or play in the championship game, if not obviously play in the Super Bowl. So you would hope that it's a second and a first if that is true. But then that conditional pick coming back if Rodgers doesn't play, in my mind, I think it has to be Green Bay's second-round pick. Obviously, we don't know what the outcome of that pick will be because it's Jordan Love, and it could be a high second-round pick in the top 40 if they bottom out and they don't have a great season in Green Bay. But I think that is a protection that Joe Douglas should be fighting for. I do not think a third is worth it if you are going to give up a 2 and a 1. I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I also heard, and this is all just speculation, but some people are kind of backing off that 90% retired remark from Rodgers and saying that might have been used as leverage for the Jets to not have to give up as much. And if that's the case, hell yeah, I'm all for it. I'm not saying I believe it or not. So maybe it is a 2-year plan for the Jets with Rodgers, and we don't know that. But on the surface, it doesn't seem that way. But what are your thoughts about this protected deal? And if it is a protected pick coming back to the Jets, does it have to be a second, or could it be a third in your mind?
Yeah, I think it can be a third, and that's kind of what I'm thinking they're going for. I don't think Green Bay's going to do a 2, especially, depending on how things unfold. Say Rodgers walks away, the Jets could end up getting a higher pick than what they gave up to get him.
Right.
So I don't think Green Bay's going to allow that to happen. I think a third is what they'll shoot for. Who knows if they'll even get it? But I think anything past this year has to be conditional, right? So it's the thing that messes me up is the Elijah Moore trade, because in my mind I was set on it's going to be a 3 and a conditional next year. Now the 3 is gone. I'm like, a 2 is way too much, and a 4. I mean, while it doesn't feel like enough, that's not far off from what they did give up for Favre. So yeah. I would say, you say, look, a 4 this year, and I'll even play along with what the media is saying and say 2, even though it makes me want to puke. Let's say it's a 2 this year. Then next year's has to be conditional. And as you said, if they go to the Super Bowl, fine, let it be a 1. But if he walks away and you're getting, let the protection pick be 1 round later than the pick Green Bay receives in the deal. Something like that. As far as Aaron Rodgers and the 90% thing being designed to, it's funny. I didn't think of that. I didn't think, well, the 90% thing. But what I did think, and this kind of ties into it, because we all spend way too much time thinking about this. I'm literally out buying dinner, and I'm like, let me think of more Aaron Rodgers scenarios right now.
It's bad. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But one thing that popped in my head, what's that?
This is a definitely rent-free situation in my head. Absolutely. Aaron Rodgers every day.
Although I'm not as aggravated by it as I was, earlier.
No, I've been stuck.
I'm just steadily getting whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I'll get aggravated if they give up a 2.
Right.
And depending on whether or not they get picks back. But my thought with the Rodgers thing was he could have helped the Jets. Like I said, I didn't have the thought about did the 90% comment help the Jets, but I thought to myself, he really could have helped the Jets. And again, not that he would have had to stick to it, but if he had said in that McAfee interview, I plan on playing, I want to play with the Jets, I want to run it back and play 1 more season. And then the Jets could say, we know this is 1 year, right. Even though he wouldn't be bound to that. And then Green Bay would kind of have to acknowledge that, and then maybe it makes it easier to get them to deal with conditional picks out, beyond this season. But I'm sure Green Bay, and as they should, they consider the negotiating table and say, listen, he might play 3 more years. Unlikely, highly unlikely.
Sure,
but not impossible. As I said, let's hypothetically say this works out, all for the best for the Jets. They win a ring this year or next year. Like maybe he says, you know what, that was fun, and I didn't get too beat up behind the O-line. I'll come back for another one. The Jets will probably pay him 60, 70 million if that's the case. But again, in my mind, it's a year. You have to approach it as if it's a year, and any additional picks have to be based on whether or not it's additional years and how they do.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way. 2 things, actually. The giving up a 2nd-round pick and the protection, it would potentially be a higher pick than what we're giving up for Rodgers. So it would kind of be bad business on the Packers' end if that was the case. And then what you just said in the second half, I don't know if Rodgers – can he help the Jets by anything that he says? When I first watched McAfee, I thought he was hurting the Jets by saying he's the best franchise player in Packers history. And then as I'm like, so many people have like replayed this video and come out with their own little spin on what they thought he might be saying.
Right.
If he didn't say it's a 1-year deal, like, could it be a 2-year deal for New York? Like, now I'm just thinking about it. Like, would he have said, hey, I'm only playing for 1 more season?
I think.
You think he's just going to like let it hang to be another off season of Rodgers and just going through the things again with the Jets next year?
I think, it's one of those things goes without saying. I think everyone knows that from this point on, it's going to be a year-to-year thing where they
Yeah.
decide whether he decides whether or not he's going to play.
Yeah, I think that's also true, but was how you brought it up and phrased it that way. I was like, damn, like he really didn't say I'm only coming back for one more year,
Right.
but
And
he
that
did
goes
say
out the
right. He did say his plan was, go on a run with Green Bay, potentially win the Super Bowl, go into the darkness and retire. So that makes me think, yeah, if he does do that with the Jets and he does fulfill everything and go to the Super Bowl, even if he doesn't win it, he might go do a darkness retreat and retire at the end of that season. So it's all up in the air. I'm hoping that if it is, like you say, a 1-year rental, I hope that it's not 2 firsts. Maybe we can go a second and a third that turns into a second with those conditions, and a first with a Super Bowl or what have you. But
yeah,
I feel like on the surface, if it's 2 second-round picks going back for Rodgers, you need
it's not,
something. You need something more than Rodgers coming back, whether it's a depth player and a fifth or a third, like you said. So, yeah, I think all the articles say within the next week or before the draft. Obviously, if they want picks for this year, it's got to be before the draft. So it's just a matter of time. We're a month out at this point, just under a month till the draft starts. So I feel like it's only going to be a couple more shows, and we'll have Rodgers.
To segue too much. Not to segue too much, but what the hell are these Packers fans thinking? They're just throwing out names and picks like it's nothing. Like,
it's so bad.
Okay, sure. We'll take 13, 42, 43, and Jermaine Johnson, and maybe a pick next year. No,
I don't know how they've clung to Jermaine Johnson, like being this piece
one person
in the draft.
mentioned it. I think it was Samini. Rich Samini said that's a name that could be involved. And Samini wasn't even saying, like, he was just throwing out a name that he thought Green Bay might want.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That day, every Packers trade proposal was like, oh, well, don't forget we're getting Jermaine Johnson too. No, you're not.
Joe Douglas spent well over an hour trying to trade up for him on night 1 of the draft. Do you think after one season, he's just going to give up on a guy that barely played last year and is expected to see a much bigger role? And we can segue into the comments and the takeaways from the owners meeting, because what he said about Elijah Moore, he's like, it's sad to see somebody go on a cap-friendly deal. Why the hell are you going to trade Jermaine Johnson when you have 4 more years of contractual obligation to him? Like, it's nonsense behavior, and I feel like the Packers fans are going to be sincerely disappointed, and they can, justify it. They're already walking it back, all the talks. And
they're like, oh, well, actually, if you think about it, pick 42 is worth more than pick 13 because shut up. It's
the difference, the difference between this pick and this pick, no.
Ever since the GM came out and said we don't need pick 13, it's been a full-on like, oh, God, what do we do now? I saw one earlier. I don't know who was a blue check. I don't know who he was. Worked for whatever sports. And he was like, oh, well, one way to easily make up the value of pick 13 is to get Jermaine Johnson with pick 42 and 43. Oh, well, there you go. You got it all figured out.
Yeah.
Except that ain't happening.
Jeez. Yep. And we could just segue right into that. Obviously, Rob Saleh and Joe Douglas spoke to the media at the owners meeting in Arizona. Actually, we could talk about the dumb rule changes, because there are a couple. I think the only one that I really care about that's not even a rule is players can wear number 0. So it's just been fun to watch the players all say they want number 0. I know you're not a jersey guy, so I'm bringing this up
I haven't been able to sleep ever since this announcement. I've been tossing and turning all night. Who's going to get number 0? I went through the whole 90-man roster and pictured in my mind who would look best with the number 0. I've narrowed it down to 46 guys. I've made a bracket. I've made a number 0 bracket, like
March Madness.
And every night I'm going to imagine 4 different players every night and see who looks better. So I'll let you know by probably 3 weeks after the draft. Jesus Christ.
That's amazing. No, I think it's a cool rule for the fans, for the jersey sale aspect of it. He's the first player in franchise history to wear number 0. I mean, it'd be cool as hell to see like an Odell Beckham in a Jets uniform with the number 0 on it, I'll be honest. But other than that, like, were there any other rules that stuck out to you? I'm trying to pull up the list of.
I glanced at them. There was nothing that really grabbed me.
They didn't.
I don't like another Thursday night game. Jesus Christ, we don't need that.
Yeah, the potential to have 2 Thursday night games where they're going to flex it from a Sunday to a Thursday the week of is so stupid to me. And I've already seen fans. I put out a tweet and I've had people comment and say, If I work all week to go to the game on Sunday just for them to flex it back to a Thursday, I'm not
Yeah.
going. And it made me think, how many times is that going to happen? And the home team could potentially lose home fans to away fans going to the game because, like, yeah, sure, a ticket on game day opens up and, it just gets filled by whoever. So I just feel like it's obviously the player safety is paramount in that whole situation. And we've already seen the highest of the high players come out and say this is stupid, like Patrick Mahomes with the hands in his head emoji. Just it's a dumb rule, and I think it shouldn't get passed.
But that's the thing, though. The league doesn't care.
Nope.
Was it Mike Florio said on McAfee today? He wouldn't be surprised if they try to find a way to have a game every night of the week.
Because they did it during the COVID season. They had a Tuesday and a Wednesday game, and it was all well and good when it's like a one-off. But yeah, I even said it. I don't think from a fan perspective, Thursday night football is a great idea. Everybody likes the idea of sitting down on Thursday night and watching a football game when it's not their favorite team. So what the hell does that say? Just stop it altogether.
The league just looks at it is in that if they did every night of the week, they would be the number one rated program every night of the week, and they could increase their revenue by being the number one program every night of the week.
Yeah, instead of asking for $3 billion for their Game Pass, they can ask for $5 billion for their Game Pass rights. Silly. I think it's stupid, and the players are never going to come first, unfortunately, when it comes to that stuff.
No, I mean, that's the thing. Like, they'll take steps that they can to improve player safety, but it's not going to be the number one priority. Money is. But at the same time, it's one of those things where players always want more money. And when the league finds a way to make more money, they're like, hey, wait a minute. Like, which one is it? We can reduce the salary cap to keep owners' profits going up. Because at the end of the day, they're business owners. And business owners come up with new ways to increase profits. So that's life.
Yep, that's life indeed. And if you look at, I believe stocks for the NFL is like, it's under a media business or something like that. It's not under a sports thing because it's a different marketing and all different, it's always money behind it. So yes, it's a business more than it is a sport sometimes. And yes, it'll fall back on the players. If the more money the NFL makes, the more they have to pay the players, or you would think. So it could all work out, but unfortunately, the injuries that come along with it, people are immediately the first ACL torn on a Thursday. It's going to be, well, see, this is why we don't do this. In a positive light, though, the Jets are taking some kind of steps to increase player safety in their own stadium. I believe Rich Cimini put out that they just unveiled the new turf in MetLife Stadium. I don't remember what the types of the turf are, but they've upgraded from the one that everybody complained about. Everybody remembers that 49ers game where they lost, I believe it was Buckner and Bosa.
3 starters.
Yeah, exactly. It was a rough game. But
Thomas too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 3 guys.
And I even said that when we were looking at it, I was like, I don't think he wants to come play here. He got hurt here. And sure enough, he's here. But so they're taking the steps to do the right things. But I also saw everybody should just turn to grass. And I think that would be a cool thing. I don't know exactly. I know the players are on board for it. I don't know what the, again, money cost is of having grass versus turf, but
that's what it is because more maintenance involved.
Right. Exactly. And we saw what happened. I believe they grew that grass in Arizona for the Super Bowl, and it lasted all of the 13 seconds before. Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, the sod father, resigning and saying, I'm sorry 2 months later, just absolute ridiculousness. But all right, on to the owners meeting, the actual news that we got from Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. My first bullet point here is the attractiveness of the Jets. I know some fans kind of have a problem with the way that they were all speaking, and Woody Johnson included, about how players want to be here and how we're now finally becoming an attractive destination. I personally love it. Like, I think this is great because we have seen absolute dog shit for the last, I'm not even going to say 40 years, but fans have watched for 40 years. I've watched for the last 10, 15, but it's been dog shit. So for finally to have free agents say they want to come to New York, Saleh even said some players have even taken a pay cut to come here. They're not even using the team as a leverage piece anymore. I'm sure some free agents are, but I thought that part of it was like kind of exciting to hear that they acknowledge that this is becoming this and that they're understanding that this is something that they have to maintain in this organization. And it's not just like, okay, we could be attractive for a couple of years, but as soon as, Aaron Rodgers leaves, we got to maintain that attractiveness. So I didn't know your thoughts on that before we get into some of the players they spoke up specifically.
Well, obviously, it's a good thing. I just would rather the owner and the coach. It almost sounds like sort of like you have low expectations for your own club. Like, hey, guess what? Good players want to come here now. Like,
Yeah.
all right, let's just keep that to ourselves. Let that be the inside voice. Let the outside voice be one of like pride and like, yeah, like we're glad we're happy with the additions we've made.
Mhm.
It's almost like I don't know. I heard it. And I was like, oh my god! Like, I get that you're happy, but you're like announcing, like bragging. Hey, guess what? Not everyone is scared to come play for us anymore. That's not
Right.
that's not something to be proud of. That's not something to brag about. It's like when I know I got to lose like 80 pounds and I lose 10, and I'm like, sweet. Like, no, there's a lot to happen before you should be happy.
Yeah.
Not like when you like that tiny bit of no. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad. Like I said, I'm glad that players want to be there. I just wish the organization would act like that's not like a big surprise.
Yeah, I guess I can kind of see how it is like braggy, like, oh my gosh, like look at us, like we're finally here.
Yeah,
We're an NFL team, and like that's literally how it feels. Like we're actually scratching the surface of like sitting at the big boy table, so to speak. Like we're at the adult table on Thanksgiving, not that little extension table that's a little lower, with the
yeah.
smaller chairs around it. So I get it. That is kind of funny. I did see the conflicting statements about Aaron Rodgers, how Joe Douglas and Rob Saleh seem very calm and relaxed about this, and then Woody just comes in with a wrecking ball of I'm anxious, and like I like it. I like Woody. I don't like him as an owner all around, and I disagree with a lot of things he's done as the owner of this team. But since he's been back, I will give him the benefit of the doubt that he's kind of stayed out of the way a little bit until this Rodgers thing. And he's come in and he's like, you know what? I just want to win. I want to win now. It's been the same way for 23 years. And I'm like, yeah, we all get that. We're kind of tired of losing as well. Like I know you are, but we are way tired of losing. So it is kind of weird to see the conflicting reports, but I'm all the way with Douglas and Saleh.
It's just
And about the Rodgers questions. I loved it.
yeah. I posted something yesterday about it, and there was one person was like, "Oh, you're an idiot. It's all orchestrated. They know exactly what they're doing. These quotes are planned out weeks in advance." Like Woody Johnson's the same guy who got hit with tampering charges for saying stuff at the podium that he shouldn't have said. Like he's gonna say whatever the hell comes to his mind because
Yeah.
who in his life tells him no? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like he's just gonna be like, yeah, I'm freaking excited. Let's get this guy, and good players want to come here, and I want Aaron Rodgers. While Joe Douglas is trying to play it cool and be like, oh, it's so no, I don't think if they were orchestrated, they were orchestrated by an idiot. There's no logical reason to come out and contradict one another. But they did, and it's silly. But at the end of the day, it's more that it sounds stupid. I don't think
Mhm.
it might give the Packers might make them feel a little better, but
It's a great little headline.
yeah, it does worry me in the respect. I guess I've said this. I'm sure I've said it on our show. I said it with Scott Mason the other day talking to him that the Packers' one play here is to hope Woody gets anxious. Like that was, and I said that a week or two ago. So
Mhm.
to hear him come out a couple days ago and go, yeah, I'm pretty anxious. I'm like, oh Jesus, that's the one thing we need. We don't need is for Woody Johnson to get anxious because
Yeah.
I have faith in Joe Douglas and that he'll orchestrate a good trade. And I've been saying for a while now, the only thing that can screw that up is Woody coming in and saying, enough of this waiting. What do they want? Give it to them. So that was like sort of doomsday quote for me to hear Woody say that. But hopefully Joe Douglas has this. I still can't get over the again, all this talk about leverage, which we're tired of hearing.
Yeah.
People, and I say all the time, that this money that players make, it really is just pennies to the owners. But 60 million isn't pennies, and
No.
that's what the Packers will owe Aaron Rodgers if he's on the roster for too long.
Mhm.
Um, that's a lot of leverage for the Jets. Like both teams have some leverage. But these people who were like, oh, the Packers they have full control of this situation. They have all the leverage. Like, listen, this isn't 10 million. This isn't 11. This is $60 million you're going to owe to this guy who's not going to be on your team.
Mhm.
Um, I would think that would be like something to sort of, especially you're trading him anyway. So I would think that would give you the
Yeah.
incentive to be like, for their ownership to be like, can we make this happen already? If we're arguing over one pick, if one draft choice, whether it's is it a 3 or a 4 or a 4 or a 5, let's move this guy along and not have to pay him $60 million. And as we said earlier, get that pick, get those picks to where we're able to get somebody in this year's draft because we have a young quarterback who's coming in, and we need to get him as much support as possible.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point that I didn't think of while we were talking about the Rodgers trade, but I had thought of previously. Do you think because of the high picks that we are sending back for Rodgers that the Packers could be willing to take on some of that $60 million? Because I always thought that pick compensation could be associated to more of how much they're going to pay for Rodgers. Or do you think that that's the compensation and the Jets and the Aaron Rodgers have already worked out a deal like the article had said? That they've already kind of done the financials and it's just a matter of the compensation. Do you think that comes into play with the Packers paying for any of the $60 million?
Well, I mean, who knows which reports are accurate at this point, but I think universally one thing we've seen in recent days and weeks is that supposedly the financials are agreed upon. So if the Jets aren't willing to bend much on what they're giving, I would get the impression the Jets aren't doing a whole lot financially to encourage the Packers to be a bit less demanding in what they're asking for. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who's paying what, because like that's a big chunk of money, man. That's not that's like historical money in terms of NFL salaries and bonus payments and things like that. So Rodgers is due a ton of cash, and the Packers are going to have to pay all of it if they don't move him. Rodgers said he understands his deal will have to be adjusted, I think was the word he used, which is a
Yeah,
nice way of saying I'm still getting every penny. We're not
every penny.
restructuring or renegotiating anything. We can do some things, but I'm getting all my money.
Yeah.
So
And he should. I mean, you won the
yeah,
MVP 2 out of 3 years. I know it wasn't for us, but like you're worth the dollars that I know it's past performance and you really shouldn't pay on past performance, but he signed the deal the Packers gave him and it's worth it for what he is.
and that's the thing. How many people have said this is like a historically bad contract? Like if
It's
you
so
knew
bad.
you were going to move on and you gave him this deal that demands all this money, over the next couple of years, it was a historically bad contract. But there are fans out there who are just like, so what? Big deal. So
Yep.
you just don't have a quarterback. We have all the leverage. Like you have leverage. You don't have all the leverage. I just wish,
Yeah.
what surprised me was how loyal. I mean, the Jets, in my mind, should have called Aaron Rodgers at some point in the last week or so and said, listen, you're our number one target. You're the guy we want to move this along. We're going to float some names. And just say, like, when you're asked about Lamar Jackson, you don't even have to say you're interested. You could just say Lamar's a very talented player and any team would be lucky to have him. That's all. You haven't said you're interested. You haven't said you're not interested. But by saying what the Jets said, no, it's only Aaron and only Aaron. It wouldn't be fair for us to talk to another player. I mean, but at the same time, as I say that, it's like everyone knows it's Aaron anyway. Like this is why Derek Carr didn't get an offer. This is why Woody Johnson is just pushing. He's 100% all in on Aaron Rodgers. So really throwing out other names, especially at this point, like maybe a month from now, maybe a few weeks from now when it's more believable. But right now, there's still so much time to get something worked out that they probably wouldn't buy it anyway. But at the same time, there's no harm in just saying, anyone to get Lamar Jackson would be lucky, and just leave it at that.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the next bullet points that I was going to get to is that Joe Douglas did say that they're not interested in pursuing Lamar Jackson. He said it would be disingenuous and dealing in bad faith. And I think that is the case. Sure, he's telling the truth, but that's only because of how far along this Rodgers deal is. I think if the Rodgers deal wasn't in actuality, like a reality as it is, I think obviously Derek Carr would have been in play much more, like you said, but I think the statements coming out would have been a slightly different about Lamar. And that's not to say, if the Aaron Rodgers thing on that 1% chance completely falls through, that he wouldn't go ask about him and do his due diligence.
Right.
But I think it was a smart play by him to put it that way, because you're dealing with Aaron Rodgers, and I understand he's a great player. He's just a little kind of moody with the things that the team says about him, and that's fine. He has his right to be sensitive or whatever. And I just think if you were to say, oh, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come here, we're just going to go right after Lamar. Like, that could rub him the wrong way and be like, you know what? If you got other plans, hey, man, go pursue those other plans. So I feel like they're just kind of.
Like, I get that's his right, but I mean, I don't know. It's crazy to me. I'm like, you're a grown up. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You not understand how the world works, and not every single thing is about you. And sometimes
that's why I
say things to make things happen that are good for the team.
Yep, and that's why I jokingly put out that tweet. I know, I think it was Seth Walder asked about drafting Will Levis at 13 if he falls, even if, or if the Aaron Rodgers thing didn't happen. And I was like, well, first of all, they shouldn't do it even if they don't have Aaron Rodgers. I don't see it anyway. But I was like, I just put, and then in 2023, before I even took a snap, they drafted my replacement, Will Levis. And then, it's something he could say, but that's, the potential shitstorm you're walking into if you go and do all this for an Aaron Rodgers, sit there, keep the 13th pick after all this Twitter back and forth, which I've said before doesn't really mean squat inside the building, but you keep 13 and then you go spend it on Will Levis. Like, of all the quarterbacks, of all the drafts, you go spend it on Will Levis. Okay, I get it. Like, he has some things that there are to be excited about, but there's a lot of things to not be excited about, like the 19 and 10 touchdown to interception ratio this past year with sub 300 or 3,000 yards. So it's not, a great statistical performance for him last season. And we've talked about it ad nauseum. Like, there's no quarterback coming to this team earlier than round 4, round 5. I don't get it. I did a small draft show, and I'm trying to do more every Monday. And I started with center, and I said, hey, just shoot out comments. And this comment said, do some mid-round quarterbacks. And I was like, I thought about it, and I was like, I don't want to do a quarterback until they actually draft one, because there are so many that you could choose from in that round 4, 5, 6 range that they might not even get taken by your team. So I said, once they get drafted, but I feel like it's not even going to happen this year. Like, you have Rodgers. They've talked about Wilson being the number 2, and we can get into that portion. I don't agree with it, and I know you don't agree with it by that reaction there, but that seems to be their plan. And if that is the plan, they're not going to take a guy in the 4th or 5th round to be that backup guy. Maybe the QB3, like I said, Aiden O'Connell came in for a visit, but yeah. What are your thoughts about Zach being QB2 versus drafting one in rounds, 4 or earlier, I'll say?
4, I could see earlier. Mm-hmm. No, Aiden O'Connell came in. He's a guy that I actually mentioned him recently, but we all know, I've said a million times, I like Hayner. Mm-hmm. Hendon Hooker with one of those 2s. If he fell, I wouldn't mind that. Yeah. I just don't think he's going to fall that far.
Not likely.
Yeah, I think if they take one, it'll be round 4, 5, 6, 7. But it's no matter where they take one, it's that guy's not going to be QB2. Zach Wilson shouldn't be QB2. That's I'm going to file that under. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah,
because you can't. And I tweeted this out a couple of weeks ago, even before the Saleh said that. Is that the year the Jets under Bill Parcells, when they were picked by a lot of people to go to the Super Bowl, and they went to the season without a viable backup. They ended up trading for Rick Meyer after Vinny Testaverde blew out his ACL or Achilles, whatever injury he had. They didn't have a backup quarterback. It's like, you went into a season with Super Bowl aspirations and didn't have a backup quarterback. And now they're they're claiming they're going to do the same thing again. Like, and I did a whole, on Monday, I did a show again with Scott from Play Like a Jet. And it was based on Rodgers and Wilson. And it was like, I don't hate the guy. Everybody knows I love them coming out of BYU. I wanted him to be the pick. He's clearly fallen apart. Because I endorsed him, I'm not going to be one of these people that defends him and blames everyone else for the way he's playing. Like, he's playing the way he's playing, and that's on him. I can just say, look, this pick looks like a complete disaster right now, and I'm not going to let the fact that I endorsed it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's not an NFL quarterback right now. The last time we saw him, he looked like a bad high school quarterback. So even I've said before, I don't think he should play before week 16 or 17. I'm talking like playoffs clinched and, let him play a half against somebody to see how much
Hmm.
progress he made throughout the year. You can tell me Aaron Rodgers, listen, even though Aaron Rodgers has been healthy, all it takes is a quarterback to bang his thumb on a defensive lineman's helmet making a throw, and he can miss 4 or 5 weeks. And
Yep.
then you can be sitting at 1-5 because you had Zach Wilson as your backup quarterback. Might they be able to pull off some wins if I mean Brees Hall's not going to be back at that point, but I just can't see it. I have a hard time believing that they're going to do all this to get Aaron Rodgers and then have Zach Wilson as their backup. It's I don't.
Yeah, it's very hard to hear those words. And even the way Saleh said it, he's like, oh, for now, he's our number two. And then he even walked that back. He's like, all right, I already see you guys pulling out your Twitter. He's like, it's not for now. Like, he is our backup. And I'm like, all right, well, that's really, really making me nervous because there aren't many, quarterback two worthy type of quarterbacks in this draft. Obviously, the Hendon Hookers of the world, but he's going to go in the first round. Somebody's going to want that fifth-year option on him because he's not playing this year. So I guess the best case scenario for the quarterback two situation would be you have a rookie like a Jake Haener 5th-round pick that comes in and says, does well in camp, not necessarily wins the job from Zach, but Zach goes out in August in the Hall of Fame game and, maybe weeks 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 of the preseason just balls out. August could be the month of Zach and he just does really well on the field. You get a really good trade offer for him. Boom, you send him away, you get something in return, which I think every Jets fan would be happy about. And then your rookie quarterback can step in as QB2. But that's a lot of optimism to happen all in one off season. I get that.
Yeah.
It's so like nauseating to hear the Zach Wilson talk on Twitter from Jets fans. And I'm not a truther. I'm not, certainly not. And I'm not a complete hater where I'm just going to throw mud at him every time I see his name on Twitter. And I just feel like there's just too much of this hate going on for Zach Wilson. Like, he's probably not going to see the field in 2023. If everything goes wrong, maybe he will. But other than that, why are we talking about a guy who's buried on the depth chart? Like, we have so much positive things to talk about. And I put out the tweet,
that's the problem,
whining about it, and it's like Zach Wilson's not even going to be on the field. Like,
but
we have
that's
so
the
much
problem
good
right now that as we're talking about it, he's not buried on the depth chart. He's number 2.
Yeah, I guess
He's a
not
little
buried,
too high on the depth chart. But I agree.
QB1.
I've openly said he's been terrible. He's been horrible. He's been historic. He's been bad enough that there's little reasons to think he'll turn it around. But I'm not gonna constantly kick the guy while he's down. You know what I mean?
Right. He's on our team. Like, I don't get why Twitter is just like so hateful of the players on our team. Like, I get it if you want to hate on a guy when he leaves, like a lot of people did Jamal Adams, and it was rightfully so with the way he left. But like, even if Zach Wilson left on good terms, people are still going to shit on the kid. And it's like, reality, he did a great thing and he got us a Hall of Fame quarterback. He got us a GOAT, like, because of how bad he played on the field. But the team was so good around him that it made everybody in the world notice, like, oh shit, the Jets have something cooking if they have a signal caller at the helm.
Mm-hmm.
And now we presumably do. And I don't know. I don't like Zach Wilson. You know that. He's never been my guy, but like, I'm gonna root for him as long as he's on this team.
Yeah.
And just similar to how people are feeling about Odell Beckham, you might not like him as a person, and you think it could be a negative. And we can get into this. He could be negative for the team, but as soon as he's on the team, it's like, all right, Odell Beckham making great catches. Man, I like this. It's going to be great. And that's how it should be. Like, we're fans. I don't get it.
I brought myself to cheer, although possibly the smallest cheer ever, for Jason Taylor. Like, and there's few players I dislike more than Jason Taylor.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know that I did cheer for him. I think he forced that safety in the AFC Championship game, and I was like, all right, whatever. Like, but I wasn't booing him, and I wasn't screaming. I was like, yeah, good. That's fine.
That's funny.
But that's Odell. I mean, he's not a good guy. He's not been a difference maker for many years. We know that, and he's coming off a major. It's mind-boggling with the number of good receivers you can get in today's game to be like, we're gonna, and I think the money. I think I said earlier, like, I'd be happy, not happy, if they had to bring him in. I think 8 to 10 million a year is a fair number, even if you
Certainly.
say 8 with incentives, whatever it may be. But I still look at it as you've got Garrett Wilson, you've got Corey Davis, you've got some decent tight ends. Why not draft a receiver and get a cheaper guy who's hungry, who doesn't have character issues? It's just it feels like they're. This is the thing about the two big moves right now, which are Rodgers and Beckham. They both seem very anti Joe Douglas. Like it's all been about like building the right way and bringing in high character guys, and all of a sudden now it's like potentially, if the reports are true, giving away premium picks for a rental and bringing in a guy with serious character issues. I was optimistic that Beckham had, kind of turned the corner. I saw him in an interview a couple, like as he was leaving Cleveland, and it could be that he was just tired of everything. But I saw this interview where it was like he was so low key and contrite, and like his answers were professional. I'm like, oh, maybe this dude's growing up, and I think I even thought like maybe kick the tires on this guy when he becomes available because he's talented, but maybe he's grown up a little bit. And then we see that video a few weeks ago of him like screaming at people on an airplane, calling them, fat and ugly because they're upset that he's making them disembark the plane. And I'm not only saying that because I'm fat and ugly. That has nothing to do with it. I just think it's not the most professional thing. And to me, that's like that's not a stable guy. That's not somebody I want in my locker room. But Joe Douglas is apparently they're willing to say, let's take this guy who's a hothead, and let's look at giving away picks. Like it's just very the opposite of what they've been doing, which has been, despite the record, has been working, bringing in high character, talented guys with their early draft picks.
Yeah, and I think they are not, the usual norm of what a Joe Douglas type would be, other than the fact that they just love ball. Like, I think that's the one thing that Rodgers and Odell do have is that just fire for football, the competitive spirit underneath them. And I know that Odell hasn't played in a while, but I don't know. I just think of everything that Rodgers has said leading up to that 90% comment where it was like a full-fledged F yeah, as far as like, does he still want to compete? I feel like those comments make me think like, yeah, I can get on board with it. But as far as the character side of it, yeah, I could see how they're not like a typical Joe Douglas guy. We talked about it, and I did vote on your poll on Twitter about him being worth 15 million. Odell Beckham. I said no, I don't think he's worth 15 million, and I know the range is somewhere between 4 is not enough and 20 is not what he's asking for. So it literally could be 5 to 19, but I think that range that you put at 8 to 10, maybe 11, something around what Lazard is being paid, and it's justifiable because, and I guess you could say this for a lot of wide receivers, maybe not so much now in the free agent market, but you could say this about a couple of the receivers in the draft, as well as Odell, that him being your wide receiver 2/3 is way better than most teams' cornerback 2. And that's an okay way to look at it, I think. Like I said, there's draft eligible wide receivers that fit that mold too. But then you add Lazard into the mix and you have Wilson, Beckham, Lazard that are all probably better than your cornerback too. So you can just kind of mix and match. You have Lazard who could be a big slot. I think Odell would probably play the least amount of slot, but you can throw Garrett back into the slot like they did a little bit down the stretch of the season last year. So I'm kind of all for it only because of Rodgers. If there was no Rodgers, I'd probably be out on Odell just because I would want to build a different way. But now that the chips are in and it's just go however long Rodgers is here, let's open that window. I've kind of just changed my perception on it. And, maybe it is the time to go all in on a 1 or 2 year actual legit Super Bowl run. And that's kind of where my feelings are with Odell Beckham.
I'd rather pass on Beckham and use 13 on Addison or Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, and I've said that Addison would be my guy at 13 if the tackles were gone, if they really didn't like Brian Branch. Addison is certainly a guy that I love at 13. And knowing how much Jordan Love likes Jackson Smith and Jigba, hey, they're both on the board. Trade up from 15 to 13 with us and come take Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then you go take Addison at 15 or whatever. And it all works out anyway. So I think that, it's certainly a way that you could go. Obviously, it looks like Odell's pretty much going to be done.
I think the tackles are going to be there.
I think one has to be almost has to be. I mean, 4, potentially 5 quarterbacks. I know the latest mock drafts have Hendon Hooker going to Seattle. at 5 and Anthony Richardson down to 11, but he was QB5 at pick 11. So if that's
Yeah.
the case, you're really pushing talent down the board. Brian Branch doesn't seem to be on that list anymore. And I think two names that I'm looking for that I'm not keen on for the Jets, Lucas Van Ness and Nolan Smith. If those guys go before the Jets pick and then the corners, you're really pushing talent down the board at 13 to the Jets. And you could have 2 or 3 tackles on the board there at
Yeah.
that pick.
I think, listen, it's all just projection and guessing and mock drafts and all that. But I was listening to Move the Chains today on the way to work. Bucky Brooks had a mock that he did, and him and Daniel Jeremiah were talking about it. And they both said that there are 4 high-end pass rushers in this class, and they think all 4 go in the top 10. Well, if you take those 4 and then 3 or 4 quarterbacks, that's 7 or 8 guys before you get to 13, and there's not a tackle off the board in that group.
Did
of
they
those
name
8,
the 4?
it was Van Ness, Smith. I forget who else off the top of my
Will
head.
Anderson, Tyree Wilson. I was just making sure that they got
yeah.
both of my guys. I was wondering if they had a 5th name in there, like somebody that I wasn't thinking of.
I don't know if you've noticed that Adebawore is getting a lot of talk about a first-round pick, man. He's
killing me, man. I wished he was. I was hoping he'd be there in the second round. I thought maybe even like a trade up potentially in second round. No, it's not. It's not looking likely.
He's getting a lot of first-round talk now. I think
Kansas City.
Samini said the other day, "Don't be, the Jets. He could be an option for the Jets." I love the guy, but
yeah,
I didn't envision him at 13. I thought, I did say that first game I watched him. I think I said this guy could sneak into the first round. So I didn't think there was any chance he'd be a Jet, but I didn't think he'd be getting talk about being 13.
Yeah, I wonder if that is like a little bit of like more optimism, like how Kalijah Cansey was mocked number 10, and now he's kind of like slid to the back half of the first round. I'm kind of hoping it is because I don't love his value at 13. I love the player, but yeah, I don't really love the value at 13, considering what could be there. Like hell, Jalen Carter could potentially be there. I know there's a lot of speculation about that, and if he's there, it's gonna raise a question for Joe Douglas. Does he take a third player this offseason that doesn't quite fit the mold of what he has built so far with the Jets? But I think it's going to be interesting. One way or another, a good player is going to be there. And Joe Douglas even said it. The chances of you hitting on a top 15, top 20 pick, like the odds are just significantly higher nowadays. And it's true. When you have a guy like Joe Douglas, sure, it's, you could pick anybody at 4 and be good, or pick anybody at 10 and it's going to make
not always.
We saw number 2. We saw number 2 not work. We've seen number 1 not work for the Jets. Obviously, it's kind of worked out, and he had a good career overall in Keyshawn Johnson. But we've just seen picks that just because they're high doesn't mean they're good. So we
Vernon
can trust Joe
Wayne Robertson. These
it goes on and on.
10 picks are not guaranteed, but
exactly.
So I think what makes me feel a lot better about the tackle situation is it's good and bad, because another guy who I was hoping might be there in the 40s, Darnell Wright. I think he's in the conversation now as a top 15 guy.
I him at 13 over Adebawore.
Yeah, anybody who watched him against Alabama, that got a lot of hype the day after the game, and I've watched a few of his games since then. And it's funny because I was watching him and I was wondering, like, why isn't this guy getting talked up more? He plays in the SEC. He's shutting down dominant pass rushers, and no one's talking about him with these big tackles. And I think it was a few weeks ago, that's almost pretty much verbatim what Daniel Jeremiah said. He said, look, this guy, he said, I'm doing my next top 50, and I think Darnell Wright's going to be within that top 20. So it's like, all right, well, now you got another body in there, and you're saying all the pass rushers are going to go, 4 pass rushers, 4 quarterbacks. That means you got to get 5 guys to the unless it goes, 5 tackles in a row. Basically, your top 13 picks or top 12 picks, you'd have to see, all quarterbacks, tackles, and edge rushers. That's not happening. Like a corner is going to go. Something like that. So,
and if not, give me the top corner on the board. I don't care how good our corner room is. Give me like Devon Witherspoon. I don't care if that's how the board falls out. I don't. I'm cool with the corner.
I think in that spot I would take. I think you mentioned I would take Jalen Carter. But
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, if he falls, but yeah, I'm 100% sure that one of the top tackles is going to be there, especially if you include Darnell Wright in that conversation. But then it becomes to the Jets, and we've talked about this. Do they look at it and go, we'd rather get Smith and Jigba and the best tackle available at 42, 43?
Yeah, and we can kind of jumble all these quotes together. I believe it was Joe Douglas said you could never have enough weapons when talking about wide receivers. So Jackson Smith and Jigba, or even a Jordan Addison, should be in play there. And then I also wanted to circle back with the tackles. Robert Saleh was asked about how he feels about the entire room. And his first comment was, I need to ask Dwayne Brown what kind of water he drinks, because Dwayne Brown is progressing very well in his rehab, despite being what a lot of people would consider over the hill for a football player. And that just kind of makes me happy, because I've always said, like, I'm comfortable with the tackle position. I would entertain it, obviously, at 13. I don't see it as like you have to take a tackle at 13. Obviously, he spoke highly of Mekhi Becton, said he's looking good, with his glow up and whatnot. But I did notice a slight drop off in how high he spoke of Dwayne Brown, and then not as high of Mekhi Becton. Not that that's a big deal, because we've heard the messaging come out between Saleh and Mekhi Becton before. So it was very positive messaging for sure. Max Mitchell, he said he's confident we'll have be back fully healthy. And then AVT, he did mention as well, but they want to keep him at right guard. So I lumped him in with the tackles, because it was kind of assumed that if they don't get a tackle and Mekhi Becton's not ready, that AVT would kind of be the right tackle. It doesn't seem to be their plan. So I think if you're looking at Dwayne Brown on the left, AVT at right guard, and then Mekhi Becton / a rookie at 13, competing for the right tackle position with Max Mitchell as your first backup, I think that's probably the most ideal situation there. What are your thoughts on them wanting to keep AVT at right guard?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, would I be happy with him at tackle and Osiris Torrance at guard if they took him? I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a little early to say, because I'm traumatized from all the tackle injuries this past season. I'm like, even if you plug him in at right guard, doesn't mean he's going to spend the whole season there. I like the versatility he showed. Everybody liked the versatility he showed last season. So I like the idea of keeping him there, because, as Saleh said, he can be an all-pro player at that position. I have no doubt. And as long as the rest of the line is shored up, then absolutely keep him there. But, will it hurt you? And not that keeping him at guard will hurt you, but I think it will make for a very interesting conversation come free agency time for AVT, because his agent's going to tell the Jets, look, other teams are willing to let him play tackle for $8 million a year more. So do you want to pay him an extra $8 million to play guard, or do you want to let him move on and play tackle, or do you want to move him to tackle? So I think tackle might be in his future just because he can play it. But as far as keeping him there now, absolutely fine. And like I said, if you were to take an Osiris Torrance, trade down and take him. That was actually the Bucky Brooks mock, had the Jets taking Torrance at 13. I don't know if they would take him that early, but if you move down to 18, 19 and he's there, and you can go with Torrance and AVT next season after maybe you send Laken Tomlinson packing. A lot of possibilities there, but I don't see how you could dislike AVT staying at right guard.
No, I think that's a really good point you bring up about getting paid to be a tackle elsewhere. And I hope that Joe Douglas would get ahead of that and say, hey, you know what? We got a guy already who we can project that happening to. So we know when it comes deal time that we need to kind of find a nice middle ground and say, hey, I would kind of not like mirror the Deebo Samuel deal, but he had incentives for if he played running back, if he hit X amount of carries or X amount of yards for the 49ers. So if you put it in his deal where AVT gets paid like a very, very high price guard, like I'm talking top 1, 2, 3 guard at the time,
you have to be in that
with
ballpark.
Incentives of playing tackle. Say he played, however many snaps at tackle, you would get X this money. So I feel like you could work it out that way, because that's your biggest fear, is another team coming in and saying, hey, how about you want to play tackle for us and we'll pay you $8 million more and whatever. Exactly. So that's a really good point to bring up. And I hope that Joe Douglas can get out on top of it. Last player I want to bring up, and then I want to hear your thoughts of that Saleh thing we were talking about offline. Carl Lawson. Normally, Robert Saleh loves to use that's a Joe D question and defer to Joe Douglas, but this time he did not. He immediately said, I could speak for Joe on this one. So I was like, oh shit, okay, he's going to say something pretty serious and truthful. Mm-hmm. Pass rushers don't grow on trees. He will be here as long as he can walk and play and affect the passer. So my immediate thought is, well, he's been the guy that has to be restructured or / extended in the final year of his deal. If that is your plan and he's here for the long-ish term, don't you just extend him now, push some money into the future so he has the 1 for 15, say you can make it a 3-year, $30 million extension and bump 5 million down the road so it becomes 10 over per year. I feel like that would be a way to open up some cap space, which I know Jason Fitzgerald of Over the Cap said that the Jets could be looking at a lot more cap space once Rodgers is in the building. They could do more restructures on the guys they've already restructured. Obviously, you have then Mosley, Lawson, and Davis are the big three. And he said they could clear up somewhere between 50 to 60 million if they did everything. Obviously, they're not going to do everything. So you would hope that they could free up 30 to 35, but that's after Aaron Rodgers. So that would be amazing. What are your thoughts, first of all, on Carl Lawson and his long-ish term plan with the team, hopefully? And then you can get into your Saleh story to close out the show.
Well, that was I think with Jason Fitzgerald saying they can clear up space, that I think once we found out they were going after Fletcher Cox and Orlando Brown and like some of these big money guys, you kind of knew, okay, they've got a plan in place to free up money, whether it's releasing guys, restructuring guys, extending guys. That's where it's going to come from. With Lawson, you could even say, like using your example, you could say 3 years, 30 million, guarantee whichever portion, however much you're willing to guarantee. And then say this year is 2 million and then 14 million each of the next 2 years. He's still getting his 30 million and you're dropping his cap number by 13 this year. So, there's a lot of ways they can do that. But the Saleh quote you mentioned, what you just said there, and I thought you would bring it up, was the thing that I thought was silly of him because he made it so obvious. And really by doing that, and listen, it's not a mystery to anyone, but Robert Saleh is kind of making it clear that those other guys aren't that safe. Like, none of them were safe enough for him to speak up on behalf of.
Right.
Like, what do you think of this? Ask Joe. What about this guy? Ask Joe. Corey Davis. Ask Joe. This guy, that's a Joe question.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Lawson. Oh, okay. That one I can answer.
That's my guy.
Because he's not going anywhere, so I can speak to Carl Lawson. All those other guys you asked me about, I know the answer, but I don't want to give it, so I'm going to pass that off to Joe, which I kind of think is funny.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
I can imagine behind closed doors, Joe's like, thanks a lot, dude. Like, just defer every hard question to me. You have no idea what's going on with these guys. And I think Saleh sometimes does it with a smirk because he knows, like, I could answer this question.
Yeah,
but I don't
100%.
I'm not going to answer it honestly. It's going to be a BS answer, whether it comes from me or Joe. So I'm going to leave to Joe to give that BS answer. Oh, here's one where I can give an honest answer. Okay, I can speak up on behalf of Carl or on behalf of Joe as it pertains to Carl. So they like him. Listen, I've said before, a lot of people have said that, he does affect the game with the pressures, and you want to see the sacks, you want to see him get home.
Mm-hmm.
But he plays a premium position. I wouldn't have been heartbroken if they'd decided they had to move on from him. But you think, Connor Hughes reported that he was playing, he had a second procedure, whatever it was, that he wasn't really 100% this year. But listen, how many? I think he had double-digit sacks his first or second year, maybe, and hasn't since then. Like, it just looks like he's never going to be that 15-sack-a-year guy. That there are some games you look at him, and, like, if that was the only game you ever saw him play, you'd be like, oh, this guy must get, like, 15 to 18 sacks a year.
Sure.
No, he gets 7. He gets 8, and he gets a bunch of pressures. And that's fine. That affects the game. I love pointing that out when guys make big time. I used to do that all the time with Leonard Williams. People would say, oh, he sucks. Listen, man, hitting the quarterback while he's throwing the ball doesn't suck. It may not get points on your fantasy team for your defensive players, but it does affect the game. So Lawson does affect the game. I thought there was a chance he'd get reworked, maybe let go because they had to free up space. But I don't mind him coming back. I thought it was part of me thought it was funny, but part of me thought it was silly for Saleh. As soon as he said that, I was driving to work, I think, wherever the hell I was driving. And as soon as he said, oh, I can speak to that, I was like, dude, you just deferred 20 personnel questions in a row.
Yep.
And you have been from the day you were hired. Joe question. Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this one I can answer. So really, if I'm Corey Davis and I'm watching that, I'll be like, you didn't speak up for me. You didn't say that, oh, I can speak for Corey. He's not going anywhere. You just said, oh, you're going to have to throw that question. So I thought it was bad, but also funny.
Yeah, and when Rob Saleh said that it's his job to make Joe Douglas's job hard in terms of having to pay players because they've
Yeah.
developed and become really good ones, I didn't think Rob Saleh would also do that in terms of contract negotiations and like putting his stamp on a guy. And my hope is that if this doesn't drive up the Carl Lawson price, hopefully they just kind of had a deal in place. Like, hey, once we get Rodgers and we know what the cap situation is, we have a plethora of moves that we are going to make. Obviously, Quinn Williams is in that bucket too. So I'm hoping that they kind of already have something worked out where once they get Rodgers into the fold, they can just start making a flurry of moves and get it all done. My funny Rob Saleh tidbit from the entire thing was it was the second the Lamar tweet came out about him requesting a trade. I believe Saleh was at the microphone because you see people picking up their microphones and walking away, I presume over to Harbaugh's table. But
Yeah.
somebody had asked him about the Lamar trade and if he had heard about it, and he just smiled at the guy because he couldn't really hear him, and he misheard Lamar as Okwara. And I was like, are they looking at Okwara? And I'm like, so I'm looking at Julian and Romeo Okwara, both defensive linemen for the Detroit Lions. I'm like, well, this is right up Rob Saleh's alley. Of course, he's going to be happy when a defensive lineman in his brain, because he heard Okwara and not Lamar. I was like, oh, okay, it's not tampering, but like, are we in on an Okwara here? Because there's one that's pretty good. They're both pretty good players, but I just thought it was funny. I was like, are we adding to the D line room? Because that'd be cool. So that was just the funny little tidbit there. Any other final notes from anything that we haven't touched on? I know Mecole Hardman's deal came in. It's very low. He has a touchdown incentive that's like 10 or more touchdowns together is $500,000. So it's not a matter of it's not a matter of money that we're scared to pay him. I think it's upward of 6.5, but realistically his cap hits like 2 something this year.
Yeah.
So they're doing very good deals with these incoming free agents. Lazard's cap hit is the same price of pick 13 in the draft. It's like just $3 million roughly this year. It's amazing.
Yeah, they're getting creative with it. One other funny thing though, and this wasn't even Saleh so much, and I don't even know if it was true, because of course they're trying to be so measured and careful about what they say at these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Rich Cimini. I could be wrong. Somebody, as soon as he was done, they said, "Robert, you're trending on Twitter," and he went, "Oh God, like what did I say?" But I don't know if it was a joke. I don't know if he was trending. But
Yeah.
and like as a head coach, you never want to be trending.
No, never.
At a lot of positions, you never want to be trending. But yeah, I think that I kind of got a laugh out of that. But yeah, it's the owners' meetings are behind us now. It was obviously an opportunity for the Jets and Packers to talk some more. Did want to mention that I tweeted this out, kind of made a joke out of it, and it was interesting. It's always good to hear from people, insiders or experts, whatever you want to call it, kind of echo some of your thoughts. And again, it's funny because I've mentioned their pod a couple times, but I think it was Daniel Jeremiah today. Who said at the owners' meetings exactly what I tweeted out. Like the Packers GM looked nervous, like talking to the media about he was like, he's like sucking his lip and eyes darting around. He looked scared. And I'm not saying he was. I watched that and I was like, he looks like, and I think I tweeted like he looks like a guy who knows he's about to have to tell his fan base some stuff they don't want to hear. Because I'm sure he knows everyone thinks they're getting a 1 and a 2 and Jermaine Johnson and maybe Sauce Gardner and blah, 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 blah. And I don't think they're getting anything close to that. And he was very I don't know. He didn't look comfortable. Joe Douglas was chilled. He was typical Joe Douglas, relaxed, just taking his questions. But yeah, well, if you haven't seen it, look at the Packers GM meeting with the media in Arizona, and he did not look like a calm, cool, collected guy. He looked like he was a little bit nervous. So we'll see.
I'm so mad that this is all coming into my brain at the very end of the show, of course, but this is exactly how I should have started this show. That if the vibes coming out of Brian Gutekunst and Joe Douglas were a telling sign of who has more leverage in this situation, I feel like those interviews were all you needed to know. Go throw on Goot first, and then Joe Douglas, and just that whole vibe is just completely different. Joe Douglas was smiling, having a good time. Goot, yeah, like you said, he's looking around, kind of, tentative, like a little nervous. Somebody described it as like the the ex who's getting like shafted in the divorce. Like you don't get the kids, you don't get the dog, you don't get the
Yeah.
house, like you're getting nothing. So like it was definitely a sight to see. So I encourage everybody, go watch Goot first and then go watch Joe Douglas's presser. But that's going to do it for us tonight. You can follow Glenn Naughton on Twitter at AceFan23. Make sure you're following his draft account at Jets Picks, Jets Picks. We'll definitely get into more draft stuff potentially next week. I feel like if there's no news, we'll just do a full draft show at this point. We're in the month of April. Starting week, it's going to come down fast. We're within a month away. You can follow me on Twitter at DTereman. Follow Jet Nation on all social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the things on YouTube. We really appreciate all the support. Glenn mentioned it. Go check out his video with Scott Mason on Monday. I believe he put that out. I also did a draft video breaking down some non-John Michael Schmidt centers, using a couple of all 22 clips. I'm going to get a little bit more efficient with it, but you can check that out too. We'll keep it coming. I believe Glenn has another one coming out with Schubert tomorrow, I believe. And until next time, let's go Jets.